Hi, I'm Maren and welcome back to my channel, Maren Makes It. Today I want to tell you guys about the products I use when I'm dyeing my own hair at home. I started doing this in 2020 when hairdressers were closed down and I was getting really fed up with how grown out my highlights were getting. I figured there had to be a way for me to be able to learn how to do this at home, and I was watching a lot of YouTube in these days. I had watched a lot of Brad Mondo's bleach fails videos. If you're not familiar with him, he's a hairdresser and he will watch people on YouTube who bleach or dye their own hair at home, and then he would react to them. But actually, while that was entertaining, in those reaction videos you learn a lot about what not to do and how to avoid certain issues when dyeing your hair at home. All of this really starts with having the correct products, because trying to do this with cheap products or the wrong products is kind of setting yourself up for failure from the start. Obviously, application technique is going to be really important too, but if you're starting with the wrong products, your application technique won't even matter that much because you're kind of doomed, honestly. So I did a lot of research into, what exactly I thought would work best on my hair type. So I'm going to share that today and kind of go over those products and why I chose the ones I ended up choosing. Since I first did my hair in 2020, I think I've done it, I want to say 5 or 6 times now that I've done my own highlights. And I have to say, every time I go to the hairdresser, they're pretty impressed at how it looks. And I have had a couple of people even ask me like, oh, when did you last get your highlights done? And I'm like, I didn't get them done, I did them myself. So I'm not saying that I'm an expert in this by any means. I'm definitely not a hair professional, but I have had a lot of experience with doing this on myself now, and I have had pretty good luck doing this at home. The other reason I really like doing this, that I highly suggest that you think about doing this too, is really just the amount of money it saves you. My hair is like down to my waist, as you can see, and I have a lot of it, and so to get something nice done like balayage highlights, it could easily cost me like over $200, and frankly I just can't afford to keep up with that kind of a hair routine right now. And so this is a way that I can save myself a lot of money. The products that I'll show you today, a lot of the ones that I'm using I have never replaced. So in the 5 or 6 times that I've done my hair, it was like a one-time investment because the bottles they give me are so big that I'm still using them today. So those savings really start to add up over time. So I just want to go over the products that I do use. So basically when I dye my hair, I do it in 2 steps. So there's going to be the lightening step, and then there's going to be the toning step. So the lightening step is basically to get my naturally, very dark brown hair to a light color. But when you use bleach on your hair to lighten your hair, it kind of always ends up like a straw yellow or like an orange color, depending on how well it develops, is what I've kind of figured out. And you might not want straw yellow highlights. And so that's where step 2 comes in. So step 2 is a toning step. So that's where you can kind of change the sort of shade of your hair a little bit. You can always go darker, but you can't go lighter with this toning step, as far as I understand. So for example, for me, I prefer to have my highlights be more like light brown highlights in dark brown hair, as opposed to like straw yellow highlights in dark brown hair. So based on that, I picked products that would tone my hair to look like that. So for this step 1, which is the lightening step, I use these 2 products right here. So these are both by Wella. So these are the products that I've been using the last few times when I've done this myself. I don't see a reason to change since it keeps working for me. And these are called Color Charm Painting Balayage Lighteners, I guess. So there's 2 steps here. So you actually have the lightening, and this is a powder. It kind of looks like powdered sugar when you pour it out. And then you have the developer here. So this is like a liquidy consistency. The reason I chose these 2 products specifically was because, first of all, they were for balayage, which is the kind of highlights I like to do. And second of all, they are clay based. And so what that means is that the clay is supposed to seal in the moisture on the strands of your hair when you paint it on. And that is supposed to help sort of create a capsule around the hair that you actually want to have lightened, if that makes sense. If you don't have this, you can risk having the bleach dry out before it has a chance to take action on your hair. And I'm somebody who lives in the desert, so for me, I know that just in general, things dry up and dry out really quickly here. For example, if I leave my clothing out to dry on hangers, as opposed to putting it in the dryer, it could be dry in several hours. Whereas I know when I'm in a more humid place, it might take like days for something like that to dry. You can probably see this with your towel too after you shower, how quickly or slowly that ends up drying. If you don't have a clay-based lightener, then you're going to want to use something like aluminum foil in order to kind of encapsulate the hair and prevent that drying out. And the second reason why the clay-based lightener is nice is because the clay is supposed to prevent the bleach from transferring. So if you picture this, like if I'm painting on my hair with bleach, and now I put this strand down on my hair, if there's bleach on here, it could touch the next strand of hair that I don't want to actually have bleached, right? And so then you end up with color basically transferring. Like you don't get these nice crisp highlights because you have the bleach transferring to other parts of your hair. So that's another reason why aluminum foil can be helpful. But the clay is supposed to avoid you having to use the aluminum foil. That being said, I have figured out that I still need to use the aluminum foil. I think part of it is just that my hair is so dark, and so in order for the color to really get lifted to a brighter blonde, I just need, first of all, I need a little bit of heat, and so the aluminum foil sort of creates this insulation effect, and like the heat from your head helps it develop, but the aluminum foil kind of helps seal all that in. Because what I'll do is I'll kind of fold them upwards on my head like this, and so then you have all the aluminum foil sort of folded up to your head, and the heat from your scalp is enough to help that develop. You don't need like one of those little bowl-y things or like that they put you in the hair salon sometimes to help it develop. But that's the reason they're doing that, is because heat helps speed up that bleach reaction. The second reason why I think I need the aluminum foil is because of this drying out effect. And the clay is supposed to help with this, but I think just because the combination of my hair being so dark and living in the desert, I think it just needs a little bit extra help. And I just have found that I get better results with the aluminum foil. So that is going to be the next recommendation for a product that I have for you guys here today. Before we talk about step 2, let's talk about some of the other accessories kind of that you need in order to be able to do this, or that can make doing this a lot easier. So the first one I'm going to say is rubber gloves, because that bleach can really sting when it hits your hands. It doesn't like bleach your skin or anything like that, but it definitely does cause like a lot of cracking and drying to your fingers if you touch it with your skin. I would recommend getting gloves that fit you pretty well. So not like those big slooshy ones where you get like the size extra large and your hands kind of sloshing around in there. Like try to get them to be pretty fitted, because it gives you a lot more dexterity and ability to kind of control what you're doing. When you have those really big ones, it's really hard to do something like, trying to weave through your hair and pick up just a few strands of hair. That gets really difficult. My next recommendation is going to be to have an assortment of different combs on hand. So here's a few different ones that I have. Ew, you can see some old hairs in there. Sorry, that's gross. And I definitely recommend one with like this kind of a stick thing on the back, or some kind of stick thing in general, like a bamboo skewer could work. The reason that you need something like this is to help you sort of weave in and out of the hair in order to be able to pick out strands of hair that you're going to highlight. In terms of the other combs, it can just be good to have these sort of as a base to kind of fold the aluminum up against, and then also just to brush through your hair. I just bought like an assortment of combs. I think I got a 10-pack of different comb sizes. You can see how different all these sizes are on Amazon or maybe Sally Beauty for like maybe 10 bucks. I'll try to link something similar to it down below in the description. My next recommendation is to have some different clips on hand. So I like to use these lobster claws, and then I also like to use these. I don't know what these are called, but they are sort of just metal clippies, but they're very easy to use. But the reason that you want these is because it makes it easier to section out your hair. And so especially if you have a lot of hair, what you're going to want to do is work generally in sections. So you want to part the hair, and then you might want to part it in some different ways. So for example, I might want to pin up this top part, because I'll start working from the bottom and then work up so that I can work here without this hair being in the way. And so then just having something easy to grab like a lobster claw or like the metal clips just makes it a lot easier to keep just the hair that you're working on in focus and keep the other stuff out of the way. Especially when you're doing this by yourself, you might be like kind of twisting into weird positions to see in the mirror, and that means that like all this hair flops around a lot more. Whereas opposed to like at the hairdresser, you're kind of just like sitting there and you're not moving, and they're moving around you. But in this case, you might have to move yourself a little bit more just in order to be able to see what you're doing, and that might mean more chances of stuff like flopping around and moving on you in this process. So in order to tone the hair, you can either use a semi or a demi-permanent dye to do this. A demi-permanent one is going to last you a little bit longer than a semi-permanent one. I personally have liked using the Wella Color Charm line for this. So you basically have two parts to it. So you have this, which is going to be the actual color, and then you have this, which is the developer for that color. So it's basically the activating lotion for that. For those of you guys who know developer numbers, this is equivalent to a 10 volume developer. It doesn't say this anywhere on the bottle, but I actually reached out to Wella, the company itself, in order to find this out because I'm really picky about what I'm going to put on my hair. So as you can see, I've experimented with a couple different of these colors, and I've left myself little notes from different times I've used them in order to remember what I did, since this is something I do so infrequently. You're going to be mixing 1 part of Wella Color Charm Demi-Permanent Hair Color with 2 parts Wella Demi-Permanent Activating Lotion. So again, that 2-to-1 ratio. The numbers you see on these containers tells you the relative lightness or darkness of hair color that these are supposed to work on. So for example, something that would be a 10A would only work on somebody that's platinum blonde, whereas something that's closer to a 5 would work on somebody that's medium brown hair, but as also on somebody with platinum blonde hair. So you can always go darker, but you can't go lighter with a demi-permanent dye. There's also going to be a letter after each of the dye colors. So N is for neutral and A is going to be for ash. So the ash has more of the blue undertones in it. The neutral is just going to be changing the color itself. You could also have a W for warm to create more of a warm look. So this is where it really depends what the look is that you're going for. You can also mix numbers together. So for example, if you mix a 5 and an 8, that's 13 total, so it's about 6.5. So you'd end up with about a 6.5 in terms of color. If you mix a 7 and an 8, you'd end up with about a 7.5 in a color. This is really useful to know in case your local store is out of a certain number. So for example, if you had your heart set on buying a 9, if they have an 8 and a 10 in stock, you could buy those two and mix them together and still have the end results that you'd be getting using a 9. You have 2 choices when it comes to application. You can either use a brush to brush on the color, or you can use a bottle to apply the color. In terms of other materials you might need, definitely you want an old t-shirt or tank top or something that you don't really care about. When you get bleach on it, it might get lightened, and then in step 2, where you are using the toner, it might get stained from the toner, so you have the chance of things getting lighter or darker than the color that they are, so definitely a time to be using an old t-shirt. You also might want to cover your work area, both the sink and like cabinet kind of area, and also the floor underneath you, with some kind of newspaper or plastic wrap or something, just because if especially the toner, if it falls on the ground, it might stain certain things. For example, like tile, I've noticed, can get stained from it. Sink, like the porcelain of the sink, can get stained from that. And I don't know how to get those stains out, frankly, because I ended up actually staining the apartment sink in my old apartment in Santa Fe a little bit in certain spots, and even bleach couldn't get the hair dye stains out of the white sink. So just something to think about there. It's a lot easier to prevent this kind of thing from happening to you than it is to try and correct it later on sometimes. Kind of in line with that, and the last thing I'll say is that you want to have a towel that you don't particularly care about around for this, because while we hope that you wash out your hair well enough that there's no bleach left to get onto your towel, and same with the toner, we hope there's nothing left. If there is, it would be unfortunate if you then toweled off your hair with your nicest, plushest, newest towel and accidentally got bleach or hair dye on it. I think I might do a video too where I kind of walk you through the steps of when I'm actually applying the stuff, but I figured there was enough information just to talk about the products alone, so I would talk about that first and see if this is a topic that even interests you guys. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. Just keep in mind with everything that you saw today in this video, I'm not a professional hairstylist. I did not go to cosmetology school. I have no formal training in this. This is all just my reading reviews on the internet, watching YouTube videos, watching more YouTube videos, watching Brad Mondo critique other people's technique, and pretty much reading reviews of products on Sally and Ulta Beauty. So that is how I came up with this sort of hair routine. I've talked it through with a couple of hairdressers when they kind of asked me how I ended up doing my own hair, and they're like, oh yeah, like it checks out, like makes sense what you used, and like obviously it's working, and my hair hasn't fallen out even after multiple times of me doing this. So I think my technique is pretty decent, but of course I am not a professional, and this video is not meant to replace the advice of a professional. Also keep in mind that everybody's hair, both in texture and style and dryness and all these different factors is different. And so just because these products work really well for me at home doesn't mean that they're going to be the best ones for you. Anyways, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. I want to hear, did you dye your hair yourself at all ever? Did it go well? Did it not go well? I always love to hear how these kind of things go for you guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate your time. See you in the next one. Bye, YouTube.